I'm your host, John Brissa. Thank you for being a subscriber. Today with me, I have Laura from Magical Mystery Church and Aaron Fochman from Underground Publishing to discuss our thoughts on Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA and Turning Point Faith and the events of where we think it might lead to everything. So I want to welcome both of them back to We've Read the Documents Again. My audience should know both of them very well. They're both dear brothers and sisters in Christ to me and to you as well. And I definitely recommend that you go subscribe to both their channels as well, Magical Mystery Church, Underground Publishing. It'll be in the show notes. Thank you both for joining me today.
Hey, John, how's it going?
Doing well.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course, always, Laura. So I'm going to discuss a little bit something that I've talked about on this channel. You guys can chime in anytime you want to. Kind of looking at more of the CNP, Council for National Policy, connections with the foundations of Turning Point USA, and where I think it's going to end up leading towards, and something that I've discussed in numerous streams on my channel. I'm not going to go into too depth here. I'll try to put in the show notes the various streams in the past where I've talked about Charlie Kirk and Council for National Policy and kind of the people that I'm going to discuss in this stream. I also want to mention, if you don't know what the Council for National Policy is, it's the right-wing version on the Council on Foreign Relations, which most of your CNP-controlled alternative media only focuses on, but instead leaves out the Council for National Policy and its involvements of world affairs, whether it's from the Franklin scandal to 9/11, to kind of the control of modern Christianity in a lot of ways in America, to pushing Christendom and Christian nationalism, and them being involved with the various Republican conservative presidents that we've had since Ronald Wilson Reagan. And I've covered the CNP in extensive in my channel. You can go back and watch my numerous videos that I've done over the years discussing the CNP. But they don't represent us. They don't represent Christians. They don't represent conservatives in America, in my opinion. Yeah. And they pretty much represent vested interests and both political capital and capital interests in general. And so, they claim they represent us. They should be like our side as Christian conservatives. They're supposed to hold, biblical values. But though, I'm not saying that there aren't people in the CNP that aren't Christians or conservatives, or they're not born again Christians. They're well-meaning. They don't know what the upper echelon of the crimes of the Council for National Policy has actually done. Just because someone's a CNP member, just like someone's a CFR member who could just be a well-meaning, misguided liberal, doesn't necessarily know what the upper echelon of these groups and secret societies do. Yeah. So I do want to make that known.
Yeah, John, and I think it's important to note too, and this is kind of where our respective research intersected, is that these groups, the forerunner to the CNP really was the John Birch Society. Correct. And that membership. And it is important to note, if you know the John Birch Society and their history of fostering conspiracy theories, it was always pointed at the Jews, the Jesuits, and the communists, never at the Freemasons and the CIA, right, with all their shenanigans. And if you understand, the roots of the, not just CIA, but the MI6 in these, Protestant, Anglican, and Scottish and American churches, which is basically mostly your Calvinist churches, but your Anglican too. And then, their influence in the fraternities that led to the creation of the intelligence communities. That partnership between those Protestants and the Freemasons goes back to the founding of the Protestants, because the Freemasons were like 300 years older than Protestant, or at least two, so it's like that partnership of this semi-Gnostic dominionist worldview was always present. And at least throughout, I would say at least from the late 1800s to the turn of the 21st century, they were always getting people's focus on, again, the Jews, the communists, and the Jesuits, on everything, and never really investigating the Freemasons and the CIA and their activities. So
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say the Robert Welsh, who was the founder of the John Birch Society, did later discuss Freemasonry, but he was kind of pushed off to the side in the '60s during that time
By that
period.
time, yeah.
Yes, but he did discuss the Freemasons openly. When you're correct that most of the CMP and most of the John Birch Society did not focus on Freemasonry or issues within the United States government itself, being kind of more of a nationalistic society and being pro-America primarily, right? And so
Yeah.
I would agree with that framework, but I would say that Welsh did during the '60s start speaking about the Freemasons.
And I think it's important to note too, it's like by that time the Freemasons was more of like a Southern good old boys club than a real political force like it was in the, Enlightenment era. It had kind of gone underground and then stayed almost like an Elks Lodge where it's like, yeah, you still have occult stuff in it, but it doesn't like that those if you will connected individuals kind of shifted towards the Greek fraternities and then towards the intelligence communities by that time.
Yeah, and I would also say as well too, to your point, is you have the CMP, which is kind of carrying the torch for the John Birch Society, being many of the original founders. One of them being R.J. Rushdoony, who you've covered
Right.
significantly both in your book. Rightly dividing and your channel as well too of pushing forth a return to Old Testament law and Christendom,
Right.
which in Christian nationalism, which he pushed very strongly, and so you kind of it's where the CMP you have a strong Mormon sect, you have a strong Zionist sect, you have a strong anti-Zionist sect, you have a strong Catholic sect, you have a strong
Hmm.
Protestant sect, you have a strong Freemason sect, and they all come together at these meetings and sit at the table.
Right.
And so it's very interesting, and you even have a strong Scientology sect within the CMP as well too that me and Josh Reeves have both covered. And interestingly enough, and aside, something I'm not really talking about today, something I'm talking about in the past, is John Mappin, who is a Scientologist, was a key figure in financing and funding with Charlie Kirk Turning Point UK.
Right. Now, I'm not that familiar with the UK branch. Can you kind of walk me through what they've been involved with?
Pretty much Brexit.
Okay. Really?
Yes.
Because it's interesting because England has not gotten much better since Brexit. It's still woke, still getting taken over by Islam. Like that was supposed Brexit was about like getting away from all that, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it's kind of
Yeah.
putting forth Brexit, ideologies, and even pushing themselves, aligning themselves with the United Kingdom Independence Party. So it's kind of like pushing forth that movement. Yeah, actually, and we'll talk about it later. You have Candace Owens, who founded Blexit, right? So that was blacks leaving the black Americans leaving the Democratic Party, and her being put together by Foster Freeze and Charlie Kirk into Turning Point USA, right? So it's kind of interesting steering of both of that. So it was kind of Turning Point UK continuing and pushing what Brexit initially started beforehand.
Yeah.
They seem to be stronger continuation of that.
It's interesting to see how quickly Candace Owens served her purpose and then it kind of got boxed out of that group. And it makes me wonder like how much of what's going on with her now being like this crazy anti-Zionist conspiracy theorist is like, okay, here's what we're going to use you for now that yeah, I mean they were successful in getting a lot of black men especially to abandon the Democratic Party to realize, hey, this is not in your best interest, right?
Hmm.
But it's almost like once that was successful, the timing of Candace Owens kind of getting a little cray-cray with the conspiracies and anti-Jew stuff, all of a sudden it's almost like, okay, now here's your new assignment. And it makes me wonder how much she may still be, a controlled, kind of voice and asset.
I think she is. Laura, do you have anything to say before I start?
No.
Okay.
I mean, about Candace Owens?
Or just in general about me talking. I'm going to start talking about the Council for National Policy's involvement in the foundation from its very inception of Turning Point USA.
Okay. No, I'll add that stuff when I do my thing.
Okay. So
now
the story of what we're told, and yes, there are research. There is a lot of important research being done of the connections of Charlie Kirk's family, specifically his father being an architect on Trump Tower, and like how far back does the Kirk family go as far as being powerful and connected, and end on like things to come with Trump being president, right? So again, that's a whole separate discussion from this. But if we take the narrative of what we know at face value, okay, Foster Freeze was the initial funder to Turning Point USA directly from Charlie Kirk, right? So Charlie Kirk says, Foster Freeze wrote Turning Point USA its first $10,000 check after I ran into him in a stairwell at the 2012 Republican National Convention. A literal elevator pitch when I was 19. I miss him every day. So the story goes that Charlie had been pitching to all the conservatives there at the Republican National Convention that he wanted to start a group that goes and speaks to various colleges and kind of like, gives them conservative talking points, right? And that's how, Turning Point USA was originally founded as a political conservative group. Christianity really had no discussion in initial Turning Point USA kind of like group and function and mission statement. It was more pushing conservatism and libertarianism, right? Which you have the Koch brothers, funding a Turning Point, as well as the DeVos family also funding Turning Point USA too, with Dick DeVos also being a major Council for National Policy member.
Right.
But so initially it was just start to push conservatism, okay? And so Foster Freeze, you might be, okay, so who's that? So I've taught about Foster Freeze a lot in this channel. He is a former Council for National Policy president. Okay, this is the 2014 list. Okay, so it's not that he's just some dude, all right? He's a stockbroker, he's an investor, he's a multimillionaire. Okay, he's very wealthy. Okay, now in this same group listing, okay, if you type Kirk, he should come up, but I might not be able to search properly in there. But Kirk was part of the William F. Buckley Jr. Kind of group early on within the CNP. Okay, so the William F. Buckley Jr. was kind of like rising CNPers in the 20s or whatever, for them to come up and for them to be a part of the CNP before they join the main CNP, right? It's like the up-and-comers, okay? So you have the William F. Buckley Jr. Council, okay, which Kirk was involved with, right? And now we can say, as of, this is one of the most recent leaked membership lists of 2020, it says long-term acknowledgement of CNP members. And it says that Foster Freeze has been a member of the CNP for 30-plus years. So the CNP started in 1981, so roughly you could say that he's been there from the very beginning, roughly, okay? So he's an influential member of the CNP. He's just not some guy that decided to join. He's a former president, okay? And as you can see, one of the most recent membership listings that we have for the Council for National Policy, we have Charlie Kirk listed as the founding and president of Turning Point USA, being a member of the CNP current of 2022. Okay, so he's been in the CNP for many years. He was in his early 20s as well, too, around the founding of Turning Point USA. And so we can see that Charlie Kirk was very much intimately involved with the Council for National Policy, too. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
John, I just, not to interrupt you, but
yes.
in your research, would you say that the CNP was always had a Christian nationalist goal, or would you say it was more of a conservative coalition?
I would say the people that were involved from it in its inception, like Tim LaHaye and Pat Robertson and R.J. Rushdoony and Sung Mung Moon from the Heretical Unification Church funding the initial early parts of the CNP. I would make an argument that they have always steered modern-day Christian thought into, either dispensationalist, pre-tribulation rapture belief systems through Left Behind, or Christian nationalist, through R.J. Rushdoony. So I think it was like they were steering them in either direction.
For different theological reasons, but they agreed on that front. And I think it's important, too, to your listeners to know that, the dispensationalists, their view of Christian nationalism has more to do with the idea that America is the restrainer, or more particularly, the Christian influence in America is the restrainer, and they believe like it's our job to hold back the evil in the world until we get raptured, and then, the Antichrist is going to come. Whereas the Rushdoony crowd, these are going to be your Calvinist Reconstructionists. They believe in a post-millennial dominionism where we're going to Christianize the world and then Christ is going to come. And they believe in something that is now manifesting in this Satan's little season ideology, but like there's going to be a rebellion against their order, and that's when Christ is going to come and destroy everybody. I recently was actually invited to check out an NAR church, and that is the precise eschatology that they hold. It is straight up amillennial dominionism, like Christ is going to come and basically destroy all the wicked. And there is no millennial rule over anyone. Like, it's just Christ is going to come, destroy the wicked, and that's the end. So it's important to know that, like, those ideas, and, you know, we can talk about that after Laura kind of walks us through the history of this kind of NAR ideology, but that those ideas were fused into the New Apostolic Reformation and have now become their standard theology that's actually on, belief statements on churches and stuff like that. It is now amillennial.
So it would make sense to you that they would yoke up together, right?
Yeah, but it's important to know, like, that's a recent development, because if you were to go back to the 90s and even the early 2000s, almost all charismatic churches were dispensational. Like, you almost never found one that wasn't. That was basically a grooming that happened from the Calvinists to the charismatics since the 80s that has now really taken root in these NAR churches.
Yeah, so that means you would have the CNP possibly steering them together, since
because it's around the same time.
Yeah.
It's almost like they partnered with the dispensationalists, but the dispensationalists are all premillennial. They partnered with them towards common interests, but their goals seem to be always infiltration and changing the theology of the dispensationalists, and they've mostly been successful with the Calvinists, but also with a lot of Baptists through the Reformed Baptists, and we'll talk through those connections later too.
Yeah, so to continue, Rick Santorum, he unsuccessfully ran for president of the Republican Party in 2012 and lost to Mitt Romney, the Mormon, who's also CNP as well too. Both him and Rick Santorum. Rick Santorum's campaign was funded by Foster Freeze. Now, Rick Santorum is a member of both Opus Dei, as you can see here as well too, is a Knight of Malta, and so he's Catholic. Now, Foster Freeze, his death, his funeral was held at a Presbyterian church. So we'll take Foster at his word that he's a Presbyterian, that he's a Protestant, right? But one thing I'm going to show here is for political expediency and the pushing of conservatism, Foster Freeze worked with anyone. And so, he worked with Rick Santorum, or funded Rick Santorum, should I say. And then here, it's talked about here, Kirk hasn't yet honed his pitch when his first big backer said yes. That backer was Foster Freeze, a 77-year-old Republican megadonor known for bankrolling Rick Santorum's 2012 presidential campaign and for his strident critiques of Islam. Kirk approached Freeze at the 2012 Republican National Convention in Tampa and asked him to donate a new student-focused group he recently created. He gave me $10,000 a couple weeks later. Suddenly, Kirk had the money and support of the conservative heavyweight. This is the greatest investment anyone ever made in me. Okay, so that's how important Kirk said Foster Freeze's investment and belief and pushing of him was.
And Kirk would have been what? He would have been just 18 at the time, maybe 19?
Yeah, 19, yes.
Okay. He's just a kid. Wow.
So then here we have, Charlie, with Foster Freeze and with his wife Lynn Freeze as well, too. We'll talk more about Lynn in a minute. And so, they were very close with each other. And then there are, of course, other people that Foster Freeze has funded who I've discussed in this channel, and I'll put the links to the stream of discussing him previously beforehand, is Ali Akbar, who's Ali Alexander, who claims he's a Catholic now, who is a known homosexual. There are allegations that he groomed groypers when he was working with Nicholas J. Fuentes, as well as, he was part of the Stop the Steal movement in January 6. Too, as well. He was funded in this National Bloggers Club directly by Foster Freeze, which later brings in the model Candace Owens as well, too. with her relationship with Ali Alexander or Ali Akbar, okay, who was later brought into Turning Point USA in the mid 2010s by Charlie Kirk, putting them all collectively together.
So now, I have a question for you, and this is more your domain than mine, but we had talked about briefly offline Candace Owens seeming to have been used to lead thinking Black Americans basically out of the Democratic Party, and then once that had been successful, she kind of shifts to this basically anti-Zionist conspiracy theorist very overtly, and that might be something that's a pre-planned thing. When you talk about, you've got Kirk on one end, you've got Candace Owens on the other, and then you've got Nick Fuentes. Is Freeze involved with grooming, like, or making, if you will, all three of them, or is he just involved with Owens and Kirk?
Fuentes, to my knowledge, I have no idea. I don't know. Candace Owens, yes, definitely. Kirk, definitely. Ali Alexander, definitely.
Because I've heard Fuentes talk about him being brought into leadership, training stuff, and I don't know. That's more your domain.
There was a meeting between Foster Freeze. No, there was a meeting not between Foster Freeze. It was between the Wilks, who fund Ben Shapiro and Fuentes, that never came to fruition. Maybe as a funding source, but I don't know about Freeze and Fuentes directly. If anybody has any information, I would love to take a look at it. But directly, I have no idea.
Yeah, I would be curious to see if, like, because again, there's an age distinction too, where it's like Nick's a little younger. Like, if there was always a plan to get him to the right and then get him more to the far right, or if alternatively he's just trying to get a coalition of right to far right, all in the camp of the Republican Party.
And Mike Cernovich as well too was involved with Ali Alexander, and paid his condolences to Foster Freeze directly as well too. So I would add Cernovich to the list of young, up and coming conservative people. And we have to remember too that Milo Yiannopoulos, the homosexual Catholic, later joined Turning Point as well too, and there were allegations that Foster also brought him in as well too.
Right.
So I can't completely confirm that one, or Cernovich. Like, I can confirm directly Ali Alexander, I confirm directly Candace Owens, and I can confirm directly Charlie Kirk. But
Right.
there
But you're
are
seeing a concerted effort to bring, gays, blacks, neo-Nazis, all these different people into the Republican Party to make it a big tent.
correct.
And they were successful, but this is a plan that goes back again almost 15 years, and it just slowly came to fruition in this past election. That's important that people know that.
And I've also discussed as well too that it was Foster Freeze that brought Kanye West in. I've done a whole stream
Okay.
on Kanye, so you can throw Kanye West in the mix, and his friendship with Candace Owens and Nicholas Fuentes being directly from Foster Freeze as well too.
And he died when?
2021.
Okay. Do you hear of anyone carrying on anything like that through his
I've looked
estate?
into his kids. Not really much information that I've seen, but his wife has. I'll talk about that in a moment.
Okay.
Anything you want to say, Laura, real quick?
No.
Okay. All right.
I'll get to the woo-woo part. I'll get to the woo-woo.
All right, I'll continue. So this is at Foster Freeze's funeral. This is Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens toasting and sitting together. And there are a lot of people. You can look in this article that was there. Laura Ingraham, Dr. Ben Carlson, Mike Pence, who there is an argumentation to be made that Mike Pence being Trump's vice president in 2016 was because of the insertion of the Council for National Policy and possibly Foster Freeze. And the Trump initially was going to go with, interestingly enough, allegedly, supposedly, Mike Flynn or even Stanley McChrystal. But yes, there was a who's who that attended his funeral, including, former CNP Dan Quayle, of course, Mike Pence's CNP as well. Kristi Noem, a former South Dakota governor, is, now handling ICE. Who's who was there at his funeral. It was held at the Presbyterian Church in Jackson Hole, which I covered Jackson Hole and the CNP's obsession with Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And then, here is Candace paying condolences to Foster Freeze, who I believe directly made her. And then, of course, this is interestingly enough, Tucker Carlson, a statement from Tucker Carlson and Neil Patel. Neil Patel is the founder of with Tucker and has known him since college. And I've done so many streams exposing Tucker. But Neil Patel was Dick Cheney's advisor and is a member of the Council for National Policy. Okay. He says, we met Charlie Kirk when he was 18 through our friend Foster Freeze and have known him well since. He was an amazing person. It's hard to find the right words in a moment like this or to understand exactly what has happened. So it's very interesting to me that at the beginning we have Foster Freeze, Charlie Kirk, Tucker Carlson.
Yeah. And it's also interesting to note how these people have evolved since then. And how all of them were shifting, less so Charlie Kirk, but there was room for that move in that direction as against Israel as time goes on.
Yeah. And then in closing, Foster Freeze's wife donated $1 million to continue Turning Point USA.
Okay.
So
where do you think TPUSA is going from here in terms of a message?
I would assume Christian nationalist. I would assume a conservatism message. I would assume based off of, I mean, you saw the Turning Point listed of who's speaking, right? Glenn Beck, the Mormon.
Right.
Let me get that list up real quick while you talk.
Do you see them as pretty much the voice piece for the CNP to the youth at this point?
I think they've always been that, but yes, I think it's more so now. They're more relevant now.
I would say, I mean, who else is there at this point, right? Because Ben Shapiro is getting clearly pushed out, just the Jewish connection. He's getting pushed out. Candace Owens is kind of getting pushed out. And what's left is more like the stoic right and then the extreme, I'm just going to call it neo-Nazi right. Like, that is what's left of the driving goals towards the youth, it seems. And it's a question of where's it going to go. And the answer seems to be more militant, more pro giving powers to the federal government to keep us safe or to punish the wicked, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's hard to not know, and we've talked about that in research, and I can jump on that a little bit later, the long-term collaboration between neo-fascists and neo-Calvinists in a goal for a Christian nationalism that was never without pro-fascist influences in it, like going all the way back to the 60s and 50s. Those elements were always a part of it.
Well, I mean, look who they have speaking here. Michael Knowles is a Catholic. Megyn Kelly is a Catholic. Mike Lee is a Mormon. Vivek Ramaswamy is Hindu. Glenn Beck is a Mormon. Rob Schneider's a Catholic. So look who they have. Erica Kirk.
Rob Schneider, the comedian, is it?
It is, yes. He's a big MAGA guy now, yes.
Okay. And Frank Turk, huh? Weird. Yeah, so you in your view of Turning Point, it sounds like to me they created Turning Point Faith to be almost a separate arm of Turning Point to galvanize religious types. Whereas Turning Point itself was never really about faith. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see them ever merging the two, or do you see them kind of keeping them separate?
I think they've already merged the two, even if they are separate.
Yeah, because I see Allie Beth Stuckey there. I mean, I even saw one of the meetings they're having. I forget what his name was, like Freedom Fest or something like that. And one of the guys in it was a guy I used to go to church with in Grand Rapids, and he was one of these guys who, again, I never realized how close the people I knew were to the DeVosses and the Van Andels and stuff. But I know people who are like, do their lawn care and work for them and nanny their kids and stuff like that, that are like wealthy, word of faith, charismatics. And the guy that I saw at this speaking event, like, I've met him and his whole family, and they're like extreme word of faith, health and wealth people. But that kind of goes hand in hand with the multi-level marketing Amway kind of brand. And these guys will just glom on to Trump and the Republican Party with no discernment whatsoever, and just, almost like see the two as like one and the same, the church and the Republican Party.
Which is pretty much what they've done. I mean, that's what the family and the fellowship effectively was. And for the CMP or the family and the fellowship, it's been more. And I'm not going to say necessarily the John Birch Society. John Birch Society never represented itself as a Christian organization. It may have Christians within it, or it may have people who, you have like the war on John Birch Society, war on Christmas, right? But it was always political. I
It was
won't say
more
always.
like
It was mostly
libertarian. Political.
it wasn't, the CMP has Judeo-Christian values listed, right? So it's putting
Right.
forth like, you know, Christians and Jews coming together for America, right?
Right.
So it's been more overtly stating that it's Christian, even though I don't believe that it is. And so again, there's people within it. Like I believe there's people within Turning Point that mean well who are born again Christians. We're gonna find out that it seems like the wheat is sifting, through the tares.
Well, I was gonna say, when you look at this young group, do you think Ben Shapiro was always meant to draw Jews out of the left? Like that was his mission, and he's kind of failed with that.
Yeah, I would say that was one of the reasons why he was funded, other than to push very strong Zionist and pro-Israel talking points.
Right.
But yes, yeah, I would say that.
Which is interesting because that really works with dispensationalism, but your neo-Calvinists are very much against that. So there is that split has always been present, and it's almost like, we're going to work with these people until we get what we want out of them, then we're going to throw them under the bus, which makes you go, okay, then who are the real string pullers? And I don't think what is the dispensationalists. I think it's the neo-Calvinists and neo-fascists. I think it always was.
I would agree at this point, at least as far as America is concerned. Within the Council for National Policy, yeah, they are a major component of it, pushing forward what we see now, especially within Christianity.
Right, and I think that would include a mix of both liberal and conservative Calvinists. You know what I mean? I don't think it's because it was always those elements that went into the intelligence communities and the American Revolution. It was never like, more conservative family values. It was they all have in common the belief in dominionism. It's just more like, are we going to get there through charity, or are we going to get there through force?
Yes, agreed. And I think, I guess we'll talk more about our conclusions later of what we think this is all going to end up becoming. But I think this was the goal of the Council for National Policy from its inception, just because of everybody that was involved and what they pushed was what we're seeing now through the culmination of this being the turning point, right? Like this is the
Right.
turning point for a Christian nationalist nation.
Right. And again, the turning point, that language was always about turning back towards conservatism. When it wasn't really, there wasn't really any openly religious elements to it in the start. Would you agree, John?
As far as the CMP,
Yeah. No, not the CMP turning point.
no, I talked about that. So initially,
Okay.
it was strictly pushing conservative libertarian talking points, and then it shifted to Kirk. As I've talked about, he had a conversation with Dave Rubin, who's a conservative, but again, he's not born again. He's
Right. He's gay.
homosexual. He's in
Yeah.
sin. And he, they're kind of having a discussion, and Kirk's kind of like, saying, well, I'm an evangelical Christian. I believe in Jesus, but the separation of church and state, right? And then he
Right.
kind of has that shift in 2019 to 2020 to more pushing Christian nationalism, which is now kind of the goal of Turning Point USA from what it seems to be. And Turning Point Faith, is, again, it's politics. It's not I'm not saying that Charlie Kirk did not ever say the gospel correctly, but that wasn't
Yeah.
his goal. That was never his goal. The goal of Turning Point USA and even Turning Point Faith, now there might be people involved with Turning Point Faith who are earnestly preaching the gospel because of the Great Commission of Jesus Christ and want people to get saved, right? But the goals of these organizations was not Jesus first. It was America first.
Yeah. And now, correct me if I'm
Or
wrong, but Dave Rubin has kind of been like de-spotlighted now that, I mean, I remember Milo being that, this wildly gay person who's also very conservative, which is like, I think they sidelined him because he was too overtly queer and
Well, they
just
brought him back now where he's shunned his homosexuality
yeah,
and
he's
is
supposedly a
Catholic now.
converted Catholic now,
Correct.
and but like Dave Rubin was always that,
Clean cut,
conservative,
Yep.
clean cut, but gay guy, right?
Hmm.
And it seems like they've gotten what they wanted out of him, and he's not being spotlighted quite as much. Do you think that's accurate?
That is accurate, yes, because the main issue that rightfully so that angered most conservatives is when him and his homosexual companion adopted children.
Right. And I mean, I was speaking out against that on like Facebook and stuff like that 10 years ago and showing people like pay attention to who your conservative voices are because it's like, you've got Jews, gays, right? Like people who are like not remotely representing Christian values, but they're putting themselves out there as representing our family values when it's like their family values aren't even remotely Christian or compatible with Christianity. But like, when did they start, and I think that Laura has some information on this, but when did they start like going, okay, now we're going to put a branch together of this for the religious as like a side project, and then what ingredients went into that, I guess.
Yeah, Laura will speak more to that, but I think it was during the pandemic. It may have been before then, but I think that was when Turning Point Faith, because they were trying to steer the pastors and get them the Reawakening America tour with Clay Clark and the
Mm,
Theosophist Michael Flynn, who's a CNP member as well too. We're giving like 50% discounts to pastors
yeah,
that showed up at the Reawaken America tour. So they were trying during the pandemic to get as many pastors underneath their false teachings as possible because the
right,
pandemic was a gross overstep of the government, both from
right.
Trump and from Biden, right? And
And
so
more so in blue states, correct? Because
correct, yes.
they were the ones who were really trying to push churches to shut down while keeping, everything from car washes to strip clubs to bars and stuff open, but the churches got to shut down. Like do you think he just capitalized on this clear discontent among Christians to say, okay, now we're going to make this overtly religious?
I would say yes.
Okay, and who's driving the shift? Who, in your opinion, is saying, okay, we need to pivot on this opportunity here?
I,
Is
s-
that Kirk himself or is that somebody
I
else?
would assume it was people within the CMP.
Okay,
You also have
because
Rob.
Freeze is still alive at this point,
Well, correct, yeah, but you also have Rob McCoy as well too,
right?
who's the Calvary Chapel pastor that kind of combined with Kirk to kind of to form Turning Point Faith, right? And to
Was
kind
he
of
CMP or was he just somebody who was
I
like,
don't know. I don't have that information.
okay, Laura, have you done research on his background? McCoy?
Yeah, that, hold on. Sorry, I was going to start somewhere else, but um, Rob McCoy is, yeah, he's a Calvary pastor, and he's funded by David Lane.
He's also a CMP member, by the way, too. I want to make that known. Rob McCoy is a member of the Council for National Policy.
Oh, he is. Hmm. Yeah. It says, I'm just going to read a few things. Lane's Christian nationalist organization was picking up meals and costs and for recruiting pastors to get involved in politics, to run for office and stuff like that. And they also, Rob McCoy was the Wilks brothers, the fracking brothers or whatever,
Who are also
frackers.
CMP as well, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and they also founded a Judaizing, or at least have been involved with a Judaizing church in Texas as well too, the Assemblies of Yahweh.
Okay, I've heard of them. They're kind of culty, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so
So
you have CNP voices trying to get Christians into politics, specifically pastors to run for office, and then Rob McCoy is one of these guys, and like he's one of the
yeah.
early adopters of that, Laura. Oh, McCoy is. Okay. Okay. And then, of course, you've got John MacArthur during this time really becoming a figurehead for standing up to the Newsom government in California. So there was a lot of public momentum to get involved now. Was McCoy involved with the CMP and this whole, this idea of Christian nationalism and Christian dominionism for a while before that, or is he kind of getting recruited around this time?
Have that information, but it would be like he's speaking during this is during the COVID pandemic. So while
Okay.
he's forming Turning Point USA, he's being platformed. Turning Point Faith. I mean, with Charlie Kirk, he's being platformed to the Council for National Policy, discussing said things.
So CNP seems to be putting the two together then. It's not him. It's not Charlie courting him or him courting Charlie. It's CNP.
I would
bringing-
assume, based off of everything we know, that would be an adequate. I don't know for sure, but that would be an intuitive, accurate assumption. Yes.
Okay. So Laura, can you walk everybody through like what is this background with the NAR and Christian nationalism on that front, and how is McCoy involved with that, and kind of walk us through the red thread in the newspapers and the connections in between all these people down to Kirk and McCoy and the other people they're associated with?
Okay. Yes. Okay, I'll tell you the other stuff later. I just have, what I did was, I didn't know that Charlie Kirk was that involved with the NAR, but he is. I mean, he's with Lance, and his pastor, Rob McCoy, like we already said, was funded by these different people. And he's also been at different events with like Cheon and Jack Hibbs. So they're all palling around. Now he's Calvary Chapel, but Cheon is one of the top NAR apostles who have governing authority. That's what they say.
Yeah.
And he's running for governor of California right now.
But correct me if I'm wrong though, Laura, but like in my experience, the Calvary Chapel people tended to be the more toned down and discerning of the charismatic groups, and they tended to avoid the NAR types prior to COVID,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. Like Jack Hibbs seemed like he was more that way before, previously.
He's more like a dispensationalist eschatology guy, right? Like then
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. But I mean, I think Calvary Chapel, if you trace it back way, way, way back, there are
There's always cross
connections.
pollination. Yeah, like because like John Wimber and Chuck Smith and the connections between Branham and them, like there was
Yeah,
always
'cause Chuck Smith, he's the one that started Calvary Chapel, right?
right. But he was a Branham manager before that.
Yes. He
Yes.
was connected with Paul Kane.
Right. And then John Wimber was Calvary Chapel before he started endorsing, became Vineyard and then started endorsing the Kansas City Prophets, which basically were
Yeah.
forerunners to the NAR. And he was also involved with C. Peter Wagner before C. Peter Wagner came up with the NAR. But I think it's important to note that even back then, the Calvary Chapels tended to look at the Vineyards and the other, Kansas City Prophets as too charismaniac. Yeah, and that
Yeah.
the general culture was kind of separated until COVID, and then they started uniting around this idea of, you know, keeping the churches open and fighting for the Christian rights and stuff like that. And those walls just kind of came down. So this is pretty recent.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to read just a little bit from an article by that Matthew Bodie
Okay.
that wrote the book, The Seven Mountains. It says, McCoy's flagrant blending of electoral politics and religion has served as an inspiration of the American Renewal Project, a group funded by the Wilks brothers. You said they were CNP?
I believe so, John, aren't they? Wilks?
Yes.
The Wilks brothers?
Yes.
Yeah. Which holds free conferences for ministers and their spouses to encourage them to emulate McCoy and run for office. According to Kirk, his conversion to Christian nationalism began after he first met McCoy at an event about 2 years ago. Now, this article is older than that, so I think it goes back to like 2015 or something. I'm not sure. He had never heard a pastor talk like that. Eventually, Kirk said McCoy pushed him to reconsider whether church and state should really be separated. Wow. And not long after that, the Turning Point activist was sold on McCoy's theocratic vision, and since then, both Kirk and McCoy have appeared at events sponsored by the Council for National Policy and so forth. And as far as David, okay, so McCoy is his pastor, and David Lane is inspired by McCoy to start funding and doing this California Renewal Project, which is trying to get more conservatives into politics and stuff. He had an event called Rediscovering God in America with Rob McCoy, Che On, Charlie Kirk, etc. He views politics as spiritual warfare, and he says separation of church and state is a lie. So that's really great. And that Christians should be retrained to war for the soul of America, which is another thing where they're talking a lot about the soul of America, as if Jesus died for the soul of America.
Yeah.
And, yeah. So one thing I wanted to, if it's okay, since it's what I talk about a lot, is what is kind of like the eschatology of the NAR and the Seven Mountains, because that is part of what I think is guiding a lot of this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, John, do most of your listeners have a background in this stuff? I think it'd be helpful.
They do, yes, but it would still be good for Laura to go ahead and discuss.
Yeah,
it.
give us a 10,000-foot view of where the stuff came from and what's their main.
This is the 10,000-foot view, because when the whole thing happened with Charlie Kirk, it was very traumatic and all that. I was worried about my kids and stuff, but I just saw how it would create momentum for the things that I warn about, which is the NAR and the New Age, and the Christian nationalism and the blending of politics and religion, and like Reawaken America stuff. I didn't really focus on Charlie Kirk that much, but the thing is that the NAR is based on latter rain teachings from way back. And even if you listen to the John Collins channel, he talks about how even the latter rain movement and all that Branham stuff, in his opinion, it was a political cult disguised as religion. In my opinion, it's both. It's like the NAR is like the New Age, which is a political and a spiritual movement. But anyway, the one thing that I think I want to get across to people is, especially when it comes to the NAR, this might be part of CNP's plan, but I don't know necessarily if it is. But what they believe, we believe that Jesus comes back in the future and he takes over, right?
Right.
We believe Jesus is God. He takes dominion. He rules. He carries out judgment.
Right.
The thing is, with the NAR and the Manifest Sons of God stuff, which is from the Latter Rain movement, when they say at a NAR church, we believe Jesus is coming back and he's going to judge the world and judge the evildoers. I don't know about that particular church, but what they really mean is they will become Christ on earth.
Yeah.
And they will take and they will carry out judgment with human agency. So
right.
that is
the Manifest Sons of God. That's the coinage for that, right?
Yes. And it really is like the externalization of the hierarchy, because it's a belief that these it's about an incarnation, a group of people being incarnated, by the spirits above, or whether it's the hierarchy or the Manifest Sons of God or whatever. So that is, to me, that's like one of the most important things to know what their goals are. Isn't to just wait for Jesus to return, but for them to do the things that Jesus does, because they're putting themselves in his place. And now it's a big part of this political religious movement that we're looking at, as far, including all the CNP donors and everybody that's making, I mean, I know everybody likes, you know, in the CNP or whatever isn't NAR. But also with the Reconstructionists, there is like the Dominion theology is in both camps. It's just that I think in the NAR side, they take it on as them
But
being,
they'll
you know,
work they'll work together though, Laura. You know,
yeah,
you'll have literally Calvinist, Christian Reconstructionists, and NAR, you know, charismatics working together to bring in, you know, a Christian nationalist nation. They don't care. At least
right.
now they don't.
And one of the other interesting things is that in the research of the latter rain movement, it's been discovered, whatever, that this woman named Jane Lead, who's like from the 17th century, but that was a very big influence on the latter rain. She even was the one that had the Cyrus prophecy about how there would be a new Cyrus that would build the temple.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yeah, I don't mean to derail what you're talking about. I just want to say this before I forget it because you guys were talking about the Wilks brothers and fracking, and it reminded me of something that's in my Rightly Dividing book. Are you familiar with Phil Anschutz? He was an
Yeah.
entertainment guy who owns like basketball teams and media, and then like Coachella. Um, he ran the Burning Bush Front, also a fracking guy. He's associated with Wilks and like stuff like Alliance Defending Freedom and Defensive Family type stuff. But he funded the rise of, back in the day, Mark Driscoll and Tim Keller, who Mark Driscoll is now becoming a very prominent member with the Turning Point, and Tim Keller was openly gay affirming. I mean, he was really telling like gays they could be gay Christians till the day they die and practicing and still go to heaven. So they also were responsible for making Calvinism popular again, basically. Tim Keller more the liberal side, and Mark Driscoll more the conservative side.
And Phil Anschutz is a member of the Council for National Policy and a major donor to the CNP recently.
Right. So people just need to hear what a small group of people who they are, and they have their hands in so many different facets of Christianity, not just the charismatic NAR, but we're now seeing all these little facets come together because Mark Driscoll, you could argue, is NAR now. You know, I mean, the way he's talking. So go ahead and continue. I just want to make sure that I didn't forget that.
Oh no, that's okay. But the reason I even brought her up is it's a fact. She wrote all this Manifest Sons of God stuff back, you know, hundreds of years ago, but she was also Calvinist.
You're talking about who now? Jane Lead?
Yeah.
She was a
That she
Calvinist.
was like she was yeah, she was part of she was Calvinist, but she was also into all this esoteric and really occult stuff and like Kabbalistic, you know, because it was kind of like back then when all that kind of Christian esotericism stuff was also kind of happening. So
Yeah.
there's that a lot of that influence in there too. So I thought that was
So she's, and I know you've talked a lot about her, and I skipped over her when I was doing my research. She was right in the middle of the era of Oliver Cromwell. And that's interesting
yeah.
because he thought he was ushering in the millennium. Did you know that? Like during, I'm curious to
I
know if they
think
knew.
yeah. Yeah, it's really I mean it's really interesting. I've been reading a lot from that Stephen Montgomery book about the converging apostasy, but it's not only him. There were early latter rain influence guys that definitely found her works and ran with it, you know. So it's you know, it's one of those things where as far as the main things are the dominion. I mean, everybody knows about the dominionism, and you know, you could say that's part of Christian nationalism, just taking over for God and everything. But the thing that people forget is there's this idea of becoming deified before they take dominion.
Yeah.
That is part of the process, kind of like the order that Christ does things. Well, he's God. Well, they become God or become perfected, become immortal, and then then they have the right to take dominion, and then they have the right to carry out judgment.
Yeah, it's just really interesting because I mean, I would really consider her more of a charismatic, even if she has Calvinist leanings, but like I don't see evidence of her and Cromwell being associated with each other, but it's just interesting that those two parallels. I mean, you could argue that Cromwell was a radical Calvinist Christian nationalist who overthrew England, alongside this mystic kind of new agey manifest sons of God person back in the 1600s, and we're seeing the exact same parallel today, where it's like it doesn't seem like the Calvinists and the Charismatics are in cahoots, and definitely the Calvinists are very openly critical of the Charismatics. But when you pull back the veil and see the funding and the connections, they're very much in cahoots.
And there's the Gnosticism,
right? In both ends, yeah.
Yeah, on both ends. It's just that one is
Valentinian,
seems more
Manichaean.
one seems more normal, and one's more like woo woo out there, you know.
Yeah.
Manifesting things, and what now?
So when did that turn into mainstream charismatic? Because I mean, obviously we have the holiness movement, then the Pentecostal movement, then the charismatic movement in like the 1960s. When did the stuff that came through Jane Lead and forward become mainstream in
Well, I mean, it's been developing, but you know, you had it start with the latter rain, but there was, you know, like you said, Pentecostal earlier things, then and then it kind of went underground a little bit. But you had the charismatic renewal, and then you have like in the 80s, it was like Kingdom Now. But that was a lot of mega churches and stuff.
We
Like
talked about that. John and I talked about that, and that is my book. That Rushdoony and Ern Baxter was shepherding movement post William Branham. Branham would be the Pentecostal end, Joel's Army, Manifest Sons of God guy. His network and disciples, guys like Ern Baxter, Derek Prince, Bob Mumford, who's associated with, what is his name, Rick Joyner, and then Ern Baxter actually took on R.J. Rushdoony as a co-editor on his magazine New Wine, and I think it was like 1986, and they changed the name of it to Kingdom Conquest. So it looks like it was the joining of, again, Calvinists and charismatics, and arguably, I would say, intelligence guys. We don't have a smoking gun, but it seems that way, to create Kingdom Now dominionism. Like this wasn't something that just happened organically, or like demons just did it by themselves. There were people joining together who were opposed to each other theologically, but creating this infusion of Calvinist Reconstructionism into the charismatic church on multiple fronts, where the charismatics had always been historically premillennial, right? Waiting for Christ to come in the second coming.
And I think a lot of people that are in the, you know, NAR or whatever, you know, you do have to almost look at it like a priesthood kind of thing, where the guys at the top know the secrets and the other people don't know, because I don't believe everybody that's going, not everybody who's going to these churches gets what they're speaking in like an esoteric way, in a coded way, when they even talk about Christ returning. But like we have an example, or I have an example of, you know, Lance Wallnau on the show saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
You know, that these sons of the world's groaning and waiting for the manifestation, not of the second coming of Christ.
Yeah.
You know, and he's saying it, but I don't think everybody necessarily gets it. But the what was going on like in the 80s and the Kingdom Dominion stuff in the charismatic world, to me, basically, it's just been moving forward and just expanding. And C. Peter Wagner named it. You know, he gave it a name, but it wasn't like it just started when he named it. It was already there.
It was already moving in a direction.
Yeah. But part of it goes back to the latter rain too, is the fivefold ministry and the idea of like a hierarchy where the apostles and the prophets, it's not just 5 gifts, it's a hierarchy. The apostle is the top. He's like the emperor, and the prophets under him, and so they believe that they because I mean, I'm sorry if this is off the topic, but my daughter-in-law asked me like something about like, what about prophecy now and prophets and stuff. I didn't really get to like answer her, but one of the differences is that these prophets believe they have governing authority. You know, that's why these churches, one reason why these churches are so messed up, because and when you start to know what their teachings are, when you hear them talking, you'll realize when they're saying some of these things about authority and just the way they go about everything, and even the
Yeah.
cover up stuff,
Well,
you know.
and
But
it's interesting that now that we're seeing this collaboration with the Mormons, because when they talk about, again, restoring the office of apostles and prophets, the restorationist movement really starts in the mid 1800s. And the first groups to be involved with it are the Churches of Christ, which actually come out of Presbyterianism. They Some of them went liberal, some of them more conservative, but they tended to be pretty evangelical. But then right after they formed, Joseph Smith forms the Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? But they're just calling themselves the Churches of Christ too, and he uses that to recruit a bunch of Church of Christ people. But their whole thing about restoring the offices of the prophets started back with Joseph Smith. It really gets picked up because, again, the restorationist ideal, the idea of God restoring the apostolic church as an idea, was really floating around with the Methodists and the holiness movement and all this stuff. And then it becomes manifest in the Pentecostal movement, which they saw as they saw that as the latter rain, whereas I would see the sealing of the 144,000 in Revelation as the latter rain. And they said, okay, this is it. And it progressed towards God's restoring the gifts. Now he's going to restore the office of a prophet. And then the final piece to that was the office of the apostle with governing authority over the rest of the church. So they really are saying, like, God is returning to the church of the book of Acts. And now these new apostles and prophets are establishing new doctrine like the apostles and prophets in the book of Acts.
And to go back to what you were saying,
Right.
Aaron, to tie everything together, this is W. Cleon Skousen. He was a major member and a lot of high member and a lot of influence within Mormonism and modern Mormon beliefs. He was also a major member within the John Birch Society and a founding member of the Council for National Policy. So,
I'm sorry, could you repeat the name again?
W. Cleon Skousen, Willard Cleon Skousen.
Okay.
So, he was a major member within the John Birch Society, early member. He's a founder of the Council for National Policy. He's a Mormon scholar. He has a lot to a lot to do with kind of like modern Mormon eschatology and the blending in of conspiracy. He was also like I said, a major member of the John Birch Society as well as he worked directly in law enforcement for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, like a lot of Mormons do. And so you have, like, again, the Mormon influence within the John Birch Society, the Mormon influence within the CNP, and more Mormon influence and the pushing of Mormonism as well too, and the yoking with Mormonism within Turning Point. It seems to be a common theme throughout these conservative circles for them to have prominent Mormons to be involved and to treat them as such, right? Because there was kind of like with the shooting that happened at the Mormon temple, there was a big push on Twitter that was like, what, you don't consider Mormons to be Christians? And it's like, no, Mormons themselves used to not considered to be Christians, right? They were out proselytizing falsely, trying to get Christians to become Mormons, right? So now all of a sudden Mormons want to be Christians as well too and be considered Christians. It's like, no, the Mormon church has forever separated itself from Christianity as being the one true branch, right? It's ridiculous. But now, because of everything going on, now they're entered into Christendom, because they've always been minded toward Christendom and Christian nationalism, the Mormons have.
Well, and if you read, there's a book I read back this would probably been like 20 years ago, but it's called The Great Apostasy, and it's a Mormon book. It sounds like, and again, I was very involved in charismatic circles back then. It sounds like it reads like a charismatic ideology of the churches being apostate and rejecting the gifts of the Spirit and the offices, and then you realize it's just like, yeah, all these ideas that are creeping into the NAR now were fully present in Mormonism 100 years earlier, right? It's not like, even though there's not direct intersection between them, it's like there probably is the same spirit behind the creation of both. It's just that the Mormons came out and isolated themselves in Utah and then, created that culture, which is huge here. I mean, from Idaho down to Mexico and everything in between. I mean, Idaho, Colorado, Phoenix, Utah, like there's a lot of Mormon influence out here. And it was like then the West Coast is where a lot of this charismatic influence had. So there probably was a fair amount of ideological cross-pollination. I guess, Laura, did you get to the point with your research, like when did the NAR grab hold of Charlie Kirk and TPUSA faith, and how did that influence him? Because it sounds like, based on just clips I've seen, he was fully sold out to an NAR idea, Seven Mountains Mandate ideology.
Yeah. I don't know exactly when when that start. I really don't know when it actually started, but he's been going on with Lance and hanging out with Sean Foyt, for years, and
Didn't he
promoting
call
that.
Lance Wallnau like one of the most important voices in Christianity?
Yes, yes,
That's so
yes.
crazy. Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
crazy.
And Lance is saying that he was a forerunner to a Seven Mountain movement,
Hmm.
and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm sorry I can't say the date when this exactly happened.
Oh,
Exactly
that's okay.
happened. But there is a lot of and you've got, like, this is weird. The Calvary Chapel pastor here on Flashpoint Live
Hmm.
with Lance and Hank Kuhneman, and that's a Kenneth Copeland show. It's like, I didn't think they were. It just seems weird.
They
Maybe he's
were.
just.
I mean, Calvary Chapels would have traditionally been historically anti-word of faith. They would have
Yeah,
considered it heresy. So it's
I
almost like,
forgot.
well, it's almost like
So
when it became the churches against the left, and really that started to happen during COVID. They just dropped all their discernment meter and started working hand in hand. That's
yeah,
what it seems like. So I first got introduced to the Seven Mountains Mandate in the early 2000s. It just happened to be a friend of a girl that I was dating at the time, who now I know was involved with the Kansas City Prophets. Thought Mike Bickle was the bee's knees. It's
yeah,
interesting because I've never had anyone, now that Mike Bickle's been exposed as a lifelong groomer, basically. Like, none of these people are coming back and going, "Oh my gosh, you were trying to warn me about him," right? But like, he had this ideology of like the Catholic Church is the harlot and Islam is the beast. He had this really weird eschatology that was all his own. And
yeah,
my first thought is, when I hear Seven Mountains Mandate, I'm like, the whore of Babylon sits on seven mountains. Like, how do you not, like, realize, like, you're
I
saying the quiet part loud?
yeah. I actually I posted on Facebook the other day. It's like, the next time you hear the Seven Mountains, remember this, and I just put up Revelation 17 or whatever. I don't understand. Like, that's a thing I don't understand, how many people can't just wonder, like, where's that in the Bible, or they don't know
I
that
almost
it
feel
is mentioned in
Well,
the
I almost
Bible.
feel like it's like a Holy Spirit thing that they adopted that terminology, because if you go back to its history, like, it starts out with Abraham Kuyper and Herman Bavinck of the Neo-Reformed movement, which is early 20th centuries, calling it sphere sovereignty. And it's all about like which spheres of dominion the church is supposed to have dominion
Yeah,
versus the state, and how they're supposed to influence each other. And then it evolves towards the seven spheres. And I believe it was Frank Schaeffer who started to talk like that in like the 60s. And then it gets picked up by Bill Bright and Lauren Cunningham, which is YWAM and Campus Crusade, their heads. And they believe they believe they got this thing from God, like a direct download from God at the same time. But Francis Schaeffer had been talking like that for like 8 years. So it's like, and then his wife
that's
was just like, what's that?
their story, that they got this simultaneous message from
Yeah,
God.
like,
I'm just
that's when this started spreading to the charismatics. It's because these guys are making the claim that, yeah, we both got the same word at the same time, and that starts spreading like wildfire. They're still not calling it seven mountains; they're calling it seven spheres. And then,
Yeah,
but then, like, it was like one of them's wife, like Lauren Cunningham's wife. I might be mistaken. That is like, oh, I heard Francis Schaeffer talking about that on the radio. Well, he had been talking about it for years because it's sphere sovereignty, and he's a disciple of Van Til, who's a disciple of Herman Bavinck and Kuyper. And it's like they literally could have heard him talking about it because he was very popular in the 60s, and then just thought they got it from God, you know what I mean? But they just picked it up from the ethos or whatever. And it was after that, I mean, because this is like the 70s when they start talking like that. Um, then Lance Wallnau picks it up, and I think he was friends with one of the two. I want to say it was Lauren Cunningham, and he renames it Seven Mountains. Like it goes from being seven spheres to seven mountains. And I'm sitting here going, if it just stayed spheres, it wouldn't have been this obvious connection with Mystery Babylon. But because they renamed it mountains, it's almost like God led them to out themselves. You know what I mean? In terms of what they were, where it's like you have to be ultra undiscerning to not hear what they're saying. You know?
But seven spheres is really bad.
Yes, because you said that has a Gnostic connection. What's that?
Yeah, it's the seven spheres that it goes way back to Gnosticism, and it's like the seven spheres that control the world, and it's the sun, the moon. It's where astrology comes from.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
And it's also kind of Kabbalah, because the top three on the Sephiroth are like the unseen world, and the bottom seven are the physical plane. And it's all about, moving from sphere to sphere.
It's also taught in Theosophy too. The seven spheres.
And converging apostasy. So the bottom Sephiroth on the Kabbalah thing is the kingdom, and it's all about bringing everything, whatever, the king, heaven down to earth and all that.
So it's like a dog whistle to historical Gnosticism and the mysteries, basically. Yeah.
And wait, look, one more thing. The sevenfold rays that Michael Flynn talked about. Okay, so if you go look into that, the seven rays are, they all have a lord over them, like an ascended master or whatever. And one is in control of politics or government. One's in control of art. One's in control of religion. One's in control of education. One's in control of that, just like the seven mountains.
It's nuts.
And I mean, Alice Bailey did talk about that. They called it the hierarchy of light, and they're working together to do this. And she lists all the different sphere names and all that. It's also it's also weird. But the other thing that's weird is not only are they talking about the seven mountains, and we know the Whore of Babylon that's sitting on the seven mountains, and the seven mountains are really the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, who turns around and kills the harlot. And you've got all this talk about destroying Babylon, invading Babylon. Like Bill Johnson and Lance Wallnau have a book called Invading Babylon.
Right.
So it's like they're telling you
that they're Mystery Babylon. Yeah. And that's what it is, because if you understand, and this is not just a church thing, but it's been historically like this with tyrants, basically people who usurp and overthrow governments, and then priesthoods. They work hand in hand, and the tyrant needs the religion, but hates the religion, right? Like, because the religion, like you can find this with the Ptolemies and the synods of Egyptian priests, or go back to Sargon of Akkad and the Canaanite priesthoods and stuff that were there in Shinar. And it's like you keep having this. You even have it like to limited degrees between the Levitical priesthood and David, where they're fighting and killing each other, right? Like, you have this tension between the religious establishment and then the political establishment, which is ultimately not resolved until Christ, who is the Melchizedek priest king, right? So it's like this tension is always in the earth, but we have like a specific prophecy that's basically telling the church the beast is going to use this false church, this politi-church, right? And then throw it under the bus as soon as he's gotten what he needs, which is world dominion, right? So it's like, here's these people's like giving you all the verbiage from the Bible to say we're that. Like, we are Mystery Babylon that's going to ultimately be used by, but again, she rides the beast, so there's the appearance of her being on top, but she ultimately gets thrown down and gored. So, like, when you see this in TPUSA, you see the stuff that's obviously, once Charlie Kirk got killed, the kind of things that we would normally be like, hey, red flag this guy. He is taking all of the bad actors, right? Christian nationalists, CNP, NAR, all this stuff that it's not just because he's died and this is clickbait now. I mean, the three of us have been speaking out against this stuff on our fronts for years now. Now you've got this guy who's just like connected to all of it, who all of a sudden is now the martyr for, the
Yeah,
Christian right, right?
yeah,
Where do you
yeah.
see, where do you see it going?
Um, I see it going. Well, I mean, I see it going towards the one world religion that's going to merge together. I mean, that I can't not see it that way, because that's what I think the NAR is doing, and of course they're already yoking up with the Pope and stuff like that, so
Yeah.
they're okay with that, you know. And I just saw it as another dividing line, where all these people are just going to go because their heartstrings, are going to move in that direction more, seeing, putting their hope in this kind of religious political machine, and thinking that because of all these guys that stood on the stage and said some true, but it was like this mixture, so even when you have some people that did say the gospel and stuff, like even Marco Rubio, he sounded pretty good, what he said.
Yeah.
I could amen to what he said. I mean, at least what I heard. And also just stirring up all the aggression for the enemy, that
Yeah.
the side that they perceive, and it's like about perception, this side that they perceive, especially, I've gotten a lot of, just on my channel, a lot of positive feedback. A lot of people saying, thank God that, somebody else is seeing what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And, that,
I feel like a lot of people are getting their eyes open too. Like their blinders are coming off when they're realizing this is not a Christian thing. It's something
yeah,
else.
yeah. So it's both, there's both reactions. It's like whiplash. Somebody said that in a comment. They felt like they had whiplash watching the memorial or whatever. But I feel like I have whiplash just watching different reactions online, or, in comments, where like the Charlie Kirk video I did definitely brought out more negative comments than, and I haven't been able to read them all, but people that were like, I thought this was a Christian channel. Obviously you just hate Erica Kirk. And I was like, I didn't
Right.
even talk about her. I did not mention her name.
Yeah.
Maybe she was in the background, but I didn't talk about her at all.
Do you,
know?
so your excuse me, your last video, and you talk, it's a great video if anyone's listening here. It's is the communion or Charlie Kirk the Catalyst. I would really highly
Yeah.
recommend people watch that. Have you, because it's up to like 16,000 views already. Have you gotten a lot of negative feedback from people on it? Like what percentage of people are listening and saying, hey, this is hate?
I haven't read. I'm trying to at least skim through them, and I'm trying to read, but it takes a while to read that many comments, and
Well,
then
yeah,
there's replies under the comments.
you've got like
But
50 comments on here already just from yesterday.
yeah, that's the. I guess I'm shocked, but I guess I should have known. When you have like a famous face, and especially right now, it's going to get more views than if I do an article or a book or something like that. But from what I've read, it's way more positive than negative, but I haven't gone through the whole entire
Yeah, I
thing.
mean, I've skimmed through it, and it seems like most people are realizing, but I would say your base, your audience has known for years that you've been speaking out against.
I don't have that many subscribers, so it's definitely a lot of people that aren't my subscribers
Yeah,
watching it. I don't have that many more. I got more views than I have subscribers, and I had one guy that said, "I'm totally out of the Christian faith." Um, really, I mean, it's longer than that, but basically, damn me to hell, and a few other comments like that. And I'm like, but you didn't say one thing about what you disagreed with. You didn't
yeah,
say anything. you are not even a Christian. You know, I'm a born again Christian. I study the Word of God. Blah blah blah. You are definitely outside of the Christian faith. Blah blah blah. And a few other comments like that. But like I said, there's no way I've read all of them. And I think maybe there might be more negative ones as time goes on, because people are sharing it with people who might be completely caught off guard by it. I think I was pretty nice though.
I do too. I think most of what you were saying that people might have a problem with is like you're literally just playing the clips where either he says something or somebody says something about him. Like, that's true, right? It's not, nothing was a hit piece about it. It was just like, here's some stuff that you should know. He's actually said this. I mean, he's actually joked with friends about bringing guillotines and public executions back. Like, because I make this point and people are just like, boo. And it's just like, I'm not like, this isn't hearsay. Like, it's on video. Like, this isn't, and he's not ashamed of it, you know. And again, I could look at him and go, okay, he's a guy in his 20s. Could I have had a similar conversation as a baby Christian in my 20s? Sure, you know, but I wasn't world famous, right? Like, you were deliberately working towards provoking, you know, political reform while saying let's bring back guillotines and public executions that make 12-year-olds watch, right? Like, that's
make 12-year-olds watch, and brought to you by Coca-Cola and all this, like,
right. Make it entertainment out of it, you know. Like, this is really sick. And
or making comments that we need a strong Mormon church.
yeah.
Why? Like,
why? And it just seems like he was a chameleon, and he would say, and that brings to bear, because again, I've heard him preach the gospel, and it's like, yeah, sounds really accurate, but again, how much of that is just he's just a really good public speaker, and he just knows what to say depending on the audience, and he just adapted that, just like he would adapt the Mary comments for the Catholics, the Mormon comments for the Mormons, the separation of church and state when he's dealing with a gay, like. Because it seems like he's just a chameleon. He's always been a chameleon. Like, and I have a hard time. Like, I don't want to condemn him for sure. Like, I want to lean towards belief that he's a brother in Christ and he's in heaven. But when it comes to just messaging, he seemed very much like a chameleon, and he would just say what it took to each audience. And to be fair, Billy Graham was like that too. And they're like, he's like he was on his way to becoming the next Billy Graham. Well, Billy Graham was like that too, you know. And most people want to idolize Billy Graham, but he was very ecumenical, very political, and very, like, polished. I mean, he was the one who made who talked Robert Schuller into getting a TV show, and Robert Schuller's a New Thought guy, right? Like, it was very clear, like, these guys just, you reach that level by basically being a professional schmooze artist, not by sticking to a message that's based on your convictions.
Yeah. And I mean, everybody's kind of...
No, go ahead, Laura. No, go ahead.
Just people are in their bubbles, right? And so I know there's people, like maybe even my kids, that what they saw of him was more his on-campus debating Christian stuff with other people, you know, a lot of that. And they saw that more, and they maybe didn't see, like, other things. I mean, I'm sure he said stuff there too, but so there's just a big perception difference as far as, like, what people saw him as. And of course you've got the left that gets to see all the worst things that he said, and then you got other people that see all the best things that he said, and everybody has a completely different person that they're viewing. And you know, I mean, the best case scenario is he was a true Christian that was very politically oriented, and he got a bit, you know, they kind of swooped in and
and I know a lot of Christians. Go ahead.
Just used them for their agenda, kind of. But that's the best case scenario.
But, like, I know a lot of Christians like that who are, like, a charismatic, let's say, and they're just as gung-ho for republicanism as they are for Christianity. But I don't know anyone that would give open praise to, you know, venerating Mary or Mormonism. Like, that seems to be like, okay, there's a certain level of selling out that he was comfortable with. And that all brings it back to, well, he wasn't preaching the gospel until the churches started getting locked out and it started becoming a right-wing political issue because the churches are getting locked down by democratic states. And that it begs the question, was any of that authentic? Not that he wasn't sharing the gospel, not that he wasn't affecting people with the gospel, but was any of that coming from an authentic place to go, I want to share the gospel with people in the context of what I'm doing? Or was it just always about getting the Christian right locked into the Republican Party?
And you could say the same thing about whoever did the person's speech right for Marco Rubio a gospel presentation, right? Because Marco Rubio is Catholic, or when who speech wrote for Donald Trump, who is also, in my opinion, not born again either, right? So a person can read from a piece of paper that's given to them a accurate gospel presentation written by a born again believer, but they don't believe it themselves necessarily,
Yeah, and they're all great speakers, so they can sound authentic saying it. That's what they do for a living, right? But have you ever heard anything faith-based come out of the mouth of Marco Rubio, with the exception of supporting Israel?
In general, no.
Me neither. He's never been outward about his faith. So for people who are just here's a guy. It's like he's the head of the State Department. He has speech writers. He didn't sit down and write that. So it's. Again, I want to err towards believing Charlie Kirk's in heaven and God is going to use some of the stuff he did. But there is such a tidal wave of, I have to call it idolatry. And this idealizing of who he was. One of the big ones that is really, honestly, kind of shocking to me. Not entirely, but kind of. How much Mike Winger has taken in with who he didn't know who Charlie Kirk was until he was invited to the Charlie Kirk thing, and now he's he's starting to change his Q&A programs to be more like Charlie Kirk, and you can tell he is really taken in with this idealized version of who Charlie Kirk is, even though he knows he disagrees. But it's but you had Joel Webbin on too, and you affirmed him as a brother in Christ who this guy seems about as fake Christian as you can get, openly collaborating with Hitler apologists and stuff like that. And it's really sad to me to see somebody who's generally received by most Christians as discerning, wise, and balanced in their theological views to be swept up in, groupthink.
Yeah, I like him, and I don't watch him all the time. I think he seems discerning and fair and balanced, and whatever you just said about Bible questions,
Mm-hmm.
But he's been very, he's getting there, but it took him a really, really long time to say Bethel and Bill Johnson and their stuff is heretical. He was standoffish about it, but he was kind of not really wanting. He seems kind of, I don't know. I'm just guessing because I don't really I don't watch every show or whatever, but I do watch, especially when he's doing one of the expose Todd White or whatever.
Yeah.
But I listen to his stuff.
He's always backburnered eschatology, and that's the thing is I made a comment based on a video he said on one of my videos. He kind of says eschatology shouldn't divide us, and of course that whole idea of eschatology shouldn't divide us is based on Calvinists trying to take over evangelical churches because they're amillennial, right? And they're also anti-evangelical, pro-infant baptism, and all kinds of other stuff, cessationists, right? And you don't realize that it's just it's them coming up with the ideas about primary and secondary issues so that they can say, if you argue with them about the stuff that is traditionally the differences between Protestants and evangelicals, and that's a secondary issue, and you're being divisive by making it a primary issue. And it's who decided it's a secondary issue? We did. And of course they make a tertiary issue, which is the furthest down in terms of priorities, eschatology, which is so stupid because it's when you get bad eschatology in church, so many cults are built around bad eschatology, but also we have the whole Roman Catholic Crusades and the Protestant, overthrow the government's dominionism and colonization and slavery and all this stuff. They're all rooted in bad eschatology. They're rooted in eschatology that says we're supposed to dominate the world instead of we're supposed to preach the gospel till Christ comes. And Christ is going to be the one who takes dominion. It's like you have all these people, charismatics, pointing to, look, God gave Adam dominion there, so for we're supposed to have dominion. And it's like, no, God gave Adam dominion, and Christ is the second Adam. He's going to have dominion, right? And we're under his authority, and we will have dominion with him when he returns to rule and reign on earth. But again, that all boils down to, what is your eschatological persuasion? Like, what do you believe happens in the last days? And if you don't believe Christ is going to come to set up his kingdom, well, there's all this stuff about kingdom and ruling over unbelievers in the prophecies, right? So if you don't believe Christ is going to do that, you're going to interpret that as us doing that, which is what post-millennialists and, more Calvinists and Protestant evangelicals have been doing. And that's how they colonized the world. That's how they, enslaved the blacks and kept, fought over keeping them enslaved. That's how they adopted evolution and eugenics as a way of, pointing to these inferior races, which was just an outworking of their belief that we're supposed to dominate them because, they came from non-Christian Africa and we came from Christian Europe, but it is conveniently looks a whole lot like the Hindu caste system, right? Like brown people at the bottom, white people at the top. And at the end of the day, your eschatology says, is our kingdom of this world, yes or no? And Jesus is clearly saying in his first coming, my kingdom is not yet of this world. If it were, my disciples would fight. And he's maintaining that until his second coming, where he says, now you have reigned. And I've tried to prod guys like Mike Winger, but I mean, all this boils all the way back to the Leadership Network and guys like Rick Warren, who push people away from studying eschatology in order to promote church growth. Because let's face it, nobody's going to try to keep growing big buildings and big shopping mall churches if you really believe Christ could be here soon. And they've really been pushing people away from watching for a second coming and saying, we need to make it about this world, where it's like you have, you have your dispensationalists who are like, okay, we need to have dominion, but we'll be raptured before the end times happens. Then you have your Calvinists who are like, we need to have dominion and there is no rapture. And then you go one step further and you've got Peter Thiel saying, we can reverse the apocalypse, right? It's almost like all three of them are just like you have in the CNP, you have people who are, in the political right wing, the people are more Christian nationalists, the people are more strictly conservative, and then the people who are just far right neo-Nazi lunatics, they're all in the same camp. We have the same thing coming into this Christian nationalist camp, whereas you've got like basically a homosexual second coming denier like Peter Thiel, who's just a nut and a transhumanist, and just like this guy represents the spirit of Antichrist like nothing else we've ever seen on earth, trying to put himself out there as a Christian, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's almost like they're being prepared, just like I said, John, with, you've got the Republicans, and then now you've got the Groypers to the right of them. It's almost like people are getting prepared towards that more fascistic leaning. In the spiritual world, you've got people getting prepared towards that transhumanist, we can reverse the apocalypse leaning. And it just seems like it's dominoes that are being set up to fall rather quickly. And in the stuff that we've seen fall, we've seen these people being used to galvanize a group and then pushed to the side. It seems to just keep happening.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have, like the CNP, you have Zionists sitting at the table with anti-Zionists.
Right.
So it's like, what you think they would be antithetical to each other's purposes, right? But no, they're not. And so
that used to be a primary issue among evangelicals on where you stand. Like, it's not that they're like, it's not like being pro-Zionist was about, we believe that, the Israeli government can do no wrong. It was about believing that the regathering of Israel into the land is a fulfillment of prophecy and setting up towards Christ's second coming. And so therefore we are not opposed to it, basically, because it's what God's doing. It's not that these people, we know they're unbelievers, and we know some are going to get saved and some are going to die and go to hell. But the point is it's something God is doing. It's just like now with Gaza. It's like that's in Joel 3 as something God's saying I'm doing. So it's like we can call it ethnic cleansing and genocide all we want, but at the end of the day, we have prophecy that says God's doing that. So we as Christians don't have a right to get on board with Greta Thunberg and say, this is wrong, if God's saying I'm doing it.
But we also don't have a right to yoke ourselves with Bibi Netanyahu and the Israeli government as well, too, through
Right.
their
And,
wickedness.
and it wasn't like that in the beginning. I mean, you never had, up until really Trump, you never had Christians like praising an Israeli leader like that, where it was just like, oh, they're so awesome. They're like, they stand with us. It was when we started exalting America to the place of an idol that Israel as its partner in the Middle East started, becoming a co-idol. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say that there was a pushing of, I mean, look at Hagee, CNP, right? And that you don't need to proselytize to Jewish
Jews,
people.
yeah.
They're a separate covenant. That's like the furthest pushing of dispensationalism and Zionism, right?
Right.
And so that was put forth by the Council for National Policy. So it's like,
But when he did that in the early 2000s, tons of evangelicals were calling him out on it
oh,
and
very
saying this
much so, yes, as they should have been. But now you have the right kind of galvanize between, you have like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, kind of pushing very strong but controlled, and Nicholas J. Fuentes like anti-Zionist messaging, where if you I'm not a dispensationalist, you guys aren't either, but kind of say what's going on in Israel and stuff like that, and kind of looking at the way that we do, we're labeled as Zionist, Bibi Netanyahu, Israeli government bootlickers. But then again, by us saying that, yeah, hey, hold up, Bibi's corrupt, like most, if not all, leaders. All right,
Right.
and there's issues with the Israeli government and the gospel and Palantir and what's being done to Palestine and stuff like that and everything. Then to that kind of weaponized Zionist faction of like Laura Loomer and the Misfit Patriot or whatever, were Hamas bootlickers.
Yeah.
Both sides hate us. And there's kind of like that push between both sides of conservatism now, where the Republican Party and the Conservative Party and conservatism is fractured. It's fractured now. And, more people are being pushed more towards, through the controlled noticing, a hatred of Jewish people and an exposure of Zionism.
Well, and that's what it seems to be. It seems to be like conservatism now is defined so loosely. It's like, well, what do we have in common? We're against trans grooming and men and women's sports as trannies. Like, okay, because there's nothing else that they're, as a whole movement, they're against. They're pro free speech. Well, they were up until Charlie Kirk, and they're pro what, I guess, libertarian economics.
Well,
Just kind of a,
before then, they were still pushing. You had through Leo Terrell, they were pro free speech unless you spoke out against Israel. Then you were not able to do so. And that's
right.
been very strong since the Trump administration. And so you're having kind of like, they used to be for free speech. They're no longer for free speech anymore. It's like, what we're a big 10, as we talked about throughout this whole entire, and we're not saying us, we're saying
Right.
the Conservative
But
Party.
that was the main. I mean, free speech was the main common thread between them, because you could argue that some people were more. They weren't all libertarians for sure. There are definitely people who are more into heavy government, not so much heavy government overreach, but people were across the spectrum in terms of economic policy. But what they had in common was the left is removing free speech. Well, now the right is removing free speech, and it seems based around Christian nationalism and Zionism.
Yes,
And
around
so,
both, yes, which is interesting because they're supposed to be non-compatible, right?
right. And so the idea is, if somebody comes along now and says, hey, this whole big tent movement was a big hypocrisy. They sold people on free speech. They're not for free speech. They sold people on exposing the JFK assassination and 9/11 and the Epstein files, and all of that is just nothing to see here, right? They sold themselves on fighting for the little guy against these big corrupt lobbying groups that are taking
No
over.
foreign wars.
Yeah, no foreign wars. We're all for foreign wars. No, big lobbyist donors basically patting the pockets of the people who are gonna, vote in their stocks. They're all for all that. And so, like, literally everything they said they were going to do and everything they said we're going to be against It's like they have not delivered on any promise, not one. They've shown that they're just like, we got what we wanted out of you. Now we're just going to do the opposite. And it seems to be that there's a movement that is starting to galvanize and is going to draw from the Republican base that is going to be anti-Zionist, anti-free speech, or pro-free speech, and then is going to get sick of this Christian nationalist crap. And I think there's a lot of Christians that are getting sick of the Christian nationalist crap and waking up to it. So it seems like that, like, I don't see a world where J.D. Vance comes forward to succeed Trump. Do you guys?
No, I don't. I don't see one. And I would say that people are getting sick of crap from all sides. I mean, you literally had a video, Rabbi Shmuley Boteach is saying that God sinned against Israel. It's like, really? This is what we're discussing now? You know?
Yeah.
And it's bad. It's real bad.
Yeah, it's pretty wackadoodle.
But he's being platformed by major Christian apologists like David Wood, you know, because they're yoking together because they're against Islam. And I criticized David Wood for that on Twitter. Why would you bring Rabbi Shmuley Boteach to the forefront where him and his daughter own a sex shop where they sell sex toys called Kosher Sex? You know, like the man, you know, is pro-Noahide laws, Chabad Lubavitch. You know, he hates Jesus Christ. Why would you platform him to own the Muslims?
Yeah, it's getting pretty weird. It's almost like you can't serve God by being against something. You have to be pro-Christ, and it's just about you serving Christ and being used by Christ. If you try to make it galvanize people against some idea or some people, it's like you can do that temporarily, but eventually the hypocrisies are just going to keep happening again and again and again. And it's like, I mean, fortunately, God moved me away from a lot of that thinking, and I think he finally broke me of it during COVID to realize, like, there is no good guys and bad guys here. There's no party that, and I've known that for a while, but, like, really got to the point where God showed me my own sin and my own desire to, you know, look at my rights and, you know, look at the potential to rebel against unjust authority and stuff like that. And God's like, no, we have no place to rebel against unjust authority. That's not our role as Christians. Ambassadors go, like, if we're an ambassador to Russia, no matter how unjust they are in Russia, there's no point where the ambassadors are like, we're going to get on board this movement of Russians overthrowing these people. Ambassadors don't do that. No, our ambassadors do because they're all CIA fronts. But, like, real ambassadors are like, we're here as peace ambassadors from another nation. We advocate, we don't interfere. That's what ambassadors do. We advocate, we don't interfere. And it's like, that was well understood in the early church, but it went away as soon as they started merging the church with the state and trying to create a Christian nationalist world, or like a Christian imperial world, right? And we're watching it go away again. The idea of being an ambassador is going away for the idea of being an influencer of government, which is, you know, I mean, again, and not to pick on Mike Winger, but this is the guy that I wouldn't expect to be about this. But he's talking about how we need to get involved with the Republican Party and reforming the Republican Party.
But he said he would get to eschatology, though. It fits his flawed mindset and worldview, Aaron. You know?
Yeah, but again, it's like you have to be so oblivious to what's happening in the world right now to think like the long game of slowly improving the Republican Party so that we can slowly.
It's impossible. You and I
America.
talked about it. It's impossible.
It's impossible. It's the Republican Party. The only reason it got on top is by getting a whole bunch of people who don't share Christian values into the party. Like, that's it.
Which is what they're doing today.
Right. So if you start pushing those values, you're going to get pro-abortion Joe Rogan to say I'm out and all his followers out. You're going to get, you know, really Satanism and transhumanism Elon Musk be like, I'm out, and all his followers
pro-homosexuality, you know, Dave Rubin out, you know.
Right. So it's like you created a big tent by basically throwing out the window what conservative is, and it made it about trannies and sports and not much else.
But it's even worse that you got evangelical Christians yoked back into the world and back into politics, you know, throwing their Christian beliefs out the window for America.
Right. Like pastors giving up their calling to pastor to be political leaders.
Yeah.
That's insane. But that's how they created the Roman Catholic Church state. Like, you literally had, I mean, like Ambrose. Ambrose was a governor and a bishop, you know, and so you had guys like this where the church effectively replaced the Senate, which that's what the Senate was. It was a balance of the people with the emperor, and now that's the balance of the church with the emperor, and then it eventually became the church over the emperor, and it eventually turned into a totally corrupt Christianity manipulating the kings of Europe, you know, and it's like, well, yeah, that's what they want to have. They're like, that was the good old days. You know, it's like they've just completely forgotten church history. But again, if you have an eschatological worldview that is cemented, because we should have the same eschatology that the apostles and their followers had, then the only thing we should be paying attention to is, where is the gospel not reached yet, and what are the signs of Christ coming, and how close does it seem? And there are people, I think, waking up and seeing that, but they're not in positions of power. The people in positions of power are seemingly being bought and sold by the political machine.
Yeah. Laura, you got anything to add in closing? Anything you can think of? Anything you want to say?
Not really. I'm just I don't know what the future is except what the Bible says. So I'm just kind of waiting to see how things turn out as far as the momentum or whatever for the Christian nationalism and all that. How many people like Mike Winger there are, and how many people are going to see what it really is, but it's kind of like, it seems to me like a culmination of a lot of things I talk about becoming more prominent, and also taking the focus off of what a lot of people were doing, which was pointing out a lot of different abuse and different things that were happening.
Yeah, you can't do that anymore without getting backlash.
So yeah, I'm, I don't know. It was definitely been a crazy couple of weeks, of unbelievable. I mean, me mainly focusing on, I missed that we had a government shutdown. Is that really happening? I didn't even know.
Yeah, it's still shut down.
Still shut down. We have Project 2025 being enacted, and them slashing the government to bring in artificial intelligence, which is what they said they were going to do. So should we be surprised? I'm not surprised. I don't doubt any of y'all are shocked. So, I mean, this is what they said was going to happen. So.
Yeah. The only other thing, as far as Charlie Kirk goes, I was thinking about is, as far as negative side effects, because I want to say, it is possible that obviously God can, bring good out of it and everything. And there are people that maybe will start going to church and doing, things like that. Hopefully they will. I'm praying for them to have discernment, that God would, the Holy Spirit would help them not to be, to lead them into truth and not get swung into political, religious, kind of movement. But some of the things that, if you're as far as he goes, he wanted you to put your trust in Trump.
Mm-hmm. And I think that was very much promoted at his memorial too.
It was. Yeah. It was. And I will say, I just want to interject something here real quick, Laura. I'll let you finish your point. It reminds me of, when they used to say, rock to vote, you get out and vote. It doesn't matter who you vote for, but people really did care who you voted for. The whole go to church, including Elon Musk retweeting Erica Kirk to go to church, right? It matters what church. Right. Don't go to a Mormon temple. Don't go to Jehovah's Witnesses. Don't go to Seventh-day Adventists. Don't go to Catholic church. Don't go to Orthodox church. It matters. But they're just saying, just go, just go, right? Just go. Doesn't matter. So to me, that's concerning, because it's a further push for ecumenicism, and it's a further push for a lack of discernment, especially when Mormons are very much trying to interject themselves right now, as Christians and stuff like that and everything. It's just they'll just telling people just to go, and it's concerning to me, and I think that's going to continue, and I think you're going to see that, and again, it's going to be harder and more difficult for us to call out what we believe to be false Christ and false faith, because they're going to be like, well, you can't just unify over Charlie Kirk. You can't just unify all over this horrible tragedy. We all got to come together, right? We got to come together to save America, right? And then a lot of people, and again, I had put Philippians 1 out here, posts on here, that there's Christ is being preached by envy, strife. There are times that people can go to these false places and the gospel is still being preached through the reading of the word, and they can still get saved. God can still save them out of that. However, I don't recommend anybody to go to any of these places because I don't consider them to be churches. I just don't. All right. And so all glory to God of what he can do out of these places, and they're born again believers that need to come out of these false churches, or false organizations, or whatever you want to call them. But again, it's this big tent for them to push. Just go. There's no discernment in it at all. And for Elon Musk to retweet Erica Kirk there, come on, people, come on, you got to know something's up with this whole thing.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but when somebody was talking about how she's being foisted in the spotlight in a big way, I think she's the new and improved Paula White.
Yeah, because Paula White's going down because
they're basically NAR.
Paula White's going down right now because of the Unification Church scandal, because Mother Moon was arrested in South Korea.
Yeah.
Paula White ain't going to be around much longer, in my opinion. We'll see.
And for whatever reason, Trump just wants to have that, classic hot blonde, right? But it's you've just got basically a new Paula White, right? And it seems like she's just going to be in the spotlight nonstop now. When are you spending time with your kids and grieving? She's just nonstop in the spotlight since then. And I'm going, yeah, I think the plan is to make her the next Paula White. Paula White is old and raggedy. I mean, she's got a lot of Botox holding it up, but she's old and raggedy.
Which leads to many conspiracies. Why isn't she taking care of her family? Why is she she is the head of Turning Point USA and Faith, and I understand that she is Charlie Kirk's widow, but why isn't she grieving? Why? And I understand that grief is different for every person. I've lost many people in my life. I understand that. However, you think she would take some time back to be with her children during this, process.
She's traveling and public speaking a lot, isn't she?
Yes, and she's pushing, frequently being on Kirk's show, smiling and laughing and being like, yeah, we got tons of content to keep doing for, he recorded so much. When did he have time to be both the family man, the example of the family man, the example of the husband, when we should point everybody to, God and Jesus Christ of, in the teachings within the Bible, inspired by the Holy Spirit, what a husband and what a father should be, right? But they're pointing everybody to Charlie Kirk. When did he have time to record years and years and years and years of content to be put out? And she's talking about how they have things lined up for 5 to 10 years out that people have never heard, to continue the business. Yes, of his content that he recorded and wrote down and did it. And yes, she said that.
That seems like it's going to be AI generated, man.
That would be my guess. And then you have the NAR people literally, I don't know, I can't call it anything else. Spencer Smith was right. And go look at Spencer Smith on the Charlie Kirk Files series. It's good work. I was writing back and forth with Spencer, sharing him some stuff. But they are necromancy. When they're using AI to have Charlie Kirk speak to their church congregations, that's necromancy. I don't know what else to call it.
Now, what it sounds like, and I've heard a little bit on that, it sounds like somebody made that. The church didn't make that. Somebody made that, and then the church played it, right?
Sure, but there were churches that were making their own, though.
Okay.
And so, you know, again, like, what are we doing? What do we do? Like, I saw Brother Hulk playing, and I wish I had the Frank Turek clip of what he's putting out. That's a whole nother discussion between me and you, Aaron, that we should talk about next time we talk. I'm gonna play that clip. People are skirting dangerously close to Charlie Kirk died for our sins.
Oh, I know. I heard.
Yeah.
I heard. And again, that's not speaking necessarily to something he's done wrong, but it is speaking to how he's like they seem so ready to go in using his death to
Yeah.
like get people to just turn off their brains and be like Charlie Kirk. And now there's like five different versions of what Charlie Kirk stood for, and everyone's trying to pull you in that direction. And like supposedly, I've seen people talking about this young kid who's like, "This is the new Charlie Kirk."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Some rich Republican kid on a private jet or whatever.
And they're just putting him out there. And the thing is like, no, don't look to Charlie Kirk. Look to Jesus. Because Charlie Kirk was a sinner just like every single person on this panel and every single person who's listening. Okay? Don't look to him. Charlie Kirk is not the example. Jesus Christ is the example.
Yeah.
But like she's making almost daily, it seems like appearances and speeches and stuff. Doesn't it seem that way?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It's weird. To all the
And
conspiracists out there, it's weird.
do they have a recording studio in their home? That's why she's able to just keep doing this stuff? Or like, is she actually traveling all around to do shows
I
and
think
stuff?
she's traveling all around, but I think they did have a recording studio nearby their home or in their home. Yes.
So where are her kids during all this?
With family, I would assume.
Because she's not really seen with her kids. She's just.
No, and her kids were not there when Charlie Kirk got assassinated, by the way. She confirmed that and said that. So.
Okay. Yeah, because I had heard that the daughter ran up to him because
Nope.
she thought.
Nope.
Someone just made that up, basically.
Yep. Erica said they were not there. And she wasn't there either. None of them were there.
Okay. It's amazing how fast lies can circulate.
1000%, yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's concerning to me. And I've seen, and Brother Hope played it. He played clips. Now, whether people were trolling or not, but there were multiple people that he was playing in clips. There were people saying, Charlie Kirk died for my sins. That's I don't know what, it's crazy. It's craziness, insanity. But, I mean, it's a spiritual delusion everybody's under right now, man. You know, and we got to keep calling it out. We got to call it no matter who this upsets. I'm sorry if it upsets you. There's a lot of blasphemic things and just bad doctrine and ecumenism and it's just a lot of bad things that are coming out of this at an accelerated pace.
Yeah. I mean, I would just want to say, like, to your listeners, like, don't try to figure out the conspiracy. Don't try to figure out, because there's so much that can just detract from the message of, hey, I think there's too much idealization and even idolization of this guy. And there's way too much Republican glom that's trying to say, hey, let's capitalize on this for Christian nationalism. Because we're hearing people talk very openly about wanting Christian nationalism now. And like, I don't think they understand what Christian nationalism is. Christian nationalism has always turned to Christians persecuting so-called heretical groups, Christians, honestly being racist and dominant, and it's never been a loving expansion of the gospel being spread. It's always been something that is a political movement about dominating and turns into really a system of hate, almost like fascistic system. Like, it's not a good thing. And there's a lot of people talking about, like, I mean, I heard Alyssa Childers talking about Christian nationalism not that long ago as if it was like democratic slander. And it's like, it's not democratic slander. It's stuff that people were very, very open about. And when they were open about it, whether it was Rushdoony or Charlie Kirk, they're all talking about, like, executing people for not keeping the laws of Moses and things like that. Like, it is very clear they're doing that. And, like, while I'm not against the death penalty for certain crimes and stuff, what I am against is people coming at this from an idea of that Christians should be executing anybody. we're here to spread the gospel, and if the government chooses to execute people for breaking certain laws, that's the government's business. It's not the business of the Christian to say join us or die. Like that's when Christ returns. That's his prerogative, and any Christian who has that kind of attitude of like we can't coexist with these people, it's like no, 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 no. Our government has laws, okay? If you have people acting a fool, acting crazy, acting seditious, murdering, pillaging, and all this stuff, the problem isn't that we need Christian nationalism. The problem is that we need execution of the laws that are already in place. And we've watched this over the past 5 years to have a government system that's like deliberately not upholding the laws. And now we have this pendulum swing back like we need this Christian nationalist fascist state, because that's really what it is, as if like that's the only alternative to what's going on. And it's like, no, we need people upholding the Constitution and defending the laws. Like that's what we need, and that would solve the problems. We don't need to give free money to rebellious people while they go mob rob stores and try to beat people up on the right out in public because they're just maniacs out of control who think they're entitled to everything. Like there are ways to solve those problems without creating anything fascistic or anything Christian nationalist. And it just seems like this is just a pre-planned thing where it's like, we make it so bad in the one direction that it allows us to implement this equally crazy stuff in the other direction, which is almost like let the Marxists loose so that they'll want, the fascists, which is kind of like, the Captain America Winter Soldier, right? Like that seems to be the plan. It's like get them begging for Hydra by, just creating chaos.
Yeah.
And nobody ever stops to think, hey, maybe it's the same people on both sides and, with the same goals, even when the people are like, hey, they were actually the same people, not only voting on the other side, but shutting you down on the internet for your free speech. It's the same people.
Yeah.
And now they're just like, well, now the Republicans doing it. It's like, no, no, no. They're on both sides of the pendulum, pushing it back and forth to the extremes. And at the end of it, their end goal seems to be total technocratic domination, which they seem to be having some success in rolling forward.
He just left.
Yeah, John just bailed on us.
Did he really?
What's that?
Is he done? Is he done, or is he coming?
Probably said to use the bathroom or something. So yeah, I mean, John and I kind of differ somewhat on where we see this heading. We agree on a lot more than we disagree on, but he sees that this could potentially roll forward into America becoming Mystery Babylon, Trump being the Antichrist, and what's going on in his push towards Israel and Gaza and all that, being the fulfillment of dividing the land and leading into Armageddon. I see it more as like America is being set up to fall before the Antichrist rises, and that includes the fall of Donald Trump, so that the real Antichrist, which I believe is going to rise in the Middle East, it looks like the Antichrist has fallen, Mystery Babylon has fallen, and then when the real Mystery Babylon and the Antichrist come, everybody is ready for it, and they're content to watch it roll out. Like, have you given any thought to eschatology on that front?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm still like not picking an antichrist, I mean, Trump does a lot of things, but I don't know. I don't know. I sometimes I can't picture him being it, and that might be the wrong way of looking at it. It's not about how you picture somebody, but I probably lean more towards what you said, but yeah, I still don't think I could say I have like a 99%. I just know he's an example of somebody that is so fake and wicked that a lot of Christians think is wonderful and good. And a lot of the political prophets are convincing you that he's, being used by God or whatever, which I mean, technically speaking, anybody in office, you could say, or who's the king or whatever is put there. But so I guess I think I see more like America going down, and Trump too. But
I'm waiting for, that just prophecies having to be fulfilled about the Jews going back to the promised land, and I don't see that happening while America remains a rich, wealthy, safe country.
yeah, like always, I kind of, the way I look at it, I just am looking at the kind of like what's right in front of me in the deception that is just seems so overwhelming, that because what I do is really honestly based on my eschatology. I wouldn't be even doing this. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it informs what I'm doing, because basically what I'm saying is this movement between the New Age, the NAR, and going out from there to the more political realms, but in the spiritual part of it, it's all about preparing the way for the Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about preparing people to receive a false Christ,
Mm-hmm.
And it's about preparing people to be hosts for spirits to come into them to worship the Antichrist. It's why it's like all this preparation being done to blind people to see false Christ as Christ, and that it's
Yeah.
actually Satan. It's Satan. It's so that is why I talk about this. If it was just these guys are heretics, I would just stay home and paint furniture and not care. I would care, but I wouldn't have ever started doing this. And like I never thought I would be like on someone's podcast or anything. So, but yeah, I mean, I just look at it like that, more like I think about individual people, and I think about like I'm watching this Bethel church thing, and it's in the video I just put today, but I'm just going to tell you that they're singing this song. This is for this communion revival, and they did like a dress rehearsal in April, and now it's coming up this week on the mall. Did you know about that?
Mm-mm.
Oh, it's the communion revival. It's a revival of blood, and it's going to be on the mall, on the Washington Mall, kind of a Bethel-backed thing. But now with the whole thing, what just happened with Charlie Kirk, I think it could be a much bigger deal. It's called Communion America. But
When is
anyway,
it?
they were the 9th through the 12th on the Feast of Tabernacles.
Okay.
Okay. And that struck a chord with me, because the Feast of Tabernacles is also a latter rain concept of becoming indwelled with this, like the manifest
Awake in
God.
the dawn.
Yes.
That's so creepy.
No, it's sick. I'm sorry. And this is another thing where it's like some people saw that memorial service and thought it was wonderful and the gospel was preached. And so a lot of people are going to see this, a communion event on the mall. And if you watch a little commercial, it's all about Jesus and the blood and this and that. But listen, there's this song they were singing at Bethel Church outside in this like big 6-hour worship long thing where they're and the girl singing, I don't know if it's a real song or if it's one of those ones they make up, but she's saying we loose the redding of America. Redding, redding, like making it red. The
Yikes.
blood like a wave. The blood like a wave. It's really creeping me out, because like this could have another meaning. This could have two meanings.
Like the purge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and and because the people that are behind it, the main guys like Lou Engle, Dean Briggs from IHOP, and some other guy that's been like friends with them, he dreams for them. He dreams for them, and they're super, super Gnostic-y and manifest sons of God, and they're talking about this. Now they've done it in other years, but this year it just seems it's 2025. And everything that just happened, it's
Yeah,
It's
that
we'll
community.
see.
I'm glad you talked about it. That communion American thing is weird. It's just when they talk about opening up
Yeah.
portals and like,
Yes.
they're trying to push Gen Z towards it, right? And it's it's ecumenism, and just right here it says celebration and commissioning for the Communion America says don't pack up early Sunday evening. We'll carry a surprise moment on the National Mall that launches us into what's next towards a great awakening in our nation. False great awakening right there, right?
Yeah, and there's such an overt like
An Israel tent, an Israel tent, a Gen Z worship tent, global teams leading worship, a
I think
mile
the
plus
Catholic
long
Church
communion
will-
table. Yeah, Catholic Church is involved. It's ecumenism at its finest.
just so happens to happen right now,
and Lou Engel's always been about merging with Catholicism, like kissing the priest's feet. Remember
Yeah.
all that he used to do?
Yes.
He's
That's in my video. The priest got down and this is worship. Okay. When you get down and prostrate yourself and kiss someone's feet, you're worshiping them.
I know.
That's what the priest did to Lou Engle, and then he turned around and did it back to him. It's creepy, and it's So I found a new channel that's very small, but the couple were at IHOP not for a very long time, and they were close with Dean Briggs, and they started to realize what his theology really was. And now they have a channel that's warning especially about this event, and they're showing lots of clips of what they're saying. This guy was even talking about, he was trying to connect tabernacles with Isaiah when it says the acceptable year of the Lord, and then after that it says in the day of judgment or the day of vengeance. He's connecting that somehow, talking about having a dream about where some places did revival, and other places didn't. There was destruction.
You have right here,
No,
Communion America is for everyone who believes and follows Jesus Christ, regardless of denomination or background. We are one in Christ. Wow.
In the essentials unity and the non-essentials liberty and all things charity. I mean, boy, like if people knew the background behind that, and again, what are the essentials? Who decides what are the essentials? And what you'll find out is there's like, well, here's a command of Jesus to do this. Yeah, that's a non-essential. What is essential? Oh, these Roman Catholic councils. You know what I mean? Like, it's the Council of Chalcedon, the Council of Nicaea, things like that. Like, what makes something essential? Who decides? And you find out, oh, it's the Catholic Church. It's the Catholic Church that decides what are the essentials. Or Protestants who are basically like saying we're the true Catholic Church, and here's the councils we agree with. Which the Catholic and the Orthodox are like, you're stupid. You can't just be like, we submit to the authority of these councils, but only up to the Council of Chalcedon. It's like they're either all valid or none of them are. Like, what makes a council valid? And the answer is nothing. It's based on the monoepiscopate and the synods, which are all just a copy of the Egyptian mysteries, and then the idea that a bunch of people can get together and decide what the faith is, when the apostles already did that. But then they can look at something that's like, well, those apostles said it's a doctrine of demons to forbid marriage, and your council full of people wants to forbid marriage, so it sounds like you're a bunch of demoniacs based on the Bible, And they look at all this stuff that's like strictly obedience to Christ. He commands us to watch for the signs of his coming. Well, that's a tertiary issue, and it's like all this stuff was just about putting people to sleep so that the people who decided who the essential issues are can take control. And you find out what their essential issues are. I mean, what it seems to be is the drivers behind this seem to be the Presbyterians. That's my opinion.
Well, Nate, that's not in my wheelhouse. I'll just say that. But
Well, I'm saying the originators of the idea. I think, again, I see different denominations and groups using each other, and some have an agenda, because Calvinists clearly don't like charismatics. Like, if you listen to them, they clearly don't like or respect them, but they're like the useful idiots for them right now. That's how it seems. And it's like they're sitting on the sidelines behind all this pro-Trump stuff and this NAR stuff, and it's like they know it's messed up, but they're not admitting their own involvement and fostering it, and their own shared goals and stuff like that. So again, I just tend to look at who's in the background, who seems to be consistently moving forward. But again, America could just go down. This could just literally just be a slew of confusion that is leading to America going down in a blaze, because we really start smoking our own stuff and thinking we're unstoppable, we're untouchable, like every empire that's followed before us.
Can I tell you another creepy thing about the revival thing, the communion thing with Lou Engle?
Yes.
Yes, I love creepy things.
This is creepy. And it's in the video, but anyway. This is in April. They were doing a fast for the communion revival. Anyway, he said he had a dream and people were taking communion and lights were breaking out everywhere, but these were the BB people, the better blood people.
Wow.
And there was other people.
Build back better, right? BBB, right?
Yeah.
Better blood people. Wow.
He said they were getting diplomas, BB diplomas. Then it meant better blood. And then the other people that were taking communion, it was a toxic brew, and there was accusation. Okay, because these guys are all getting accused, right? That camp. And he said, but these guys were getting diploma. And darkness spread everywhere, and they were getting diplomas. This is a dream. That was the BA diploma, the brethren accuser. That's Satan. And then later on, he said, and the same story again in another event, and he said, and the blood at the communion revival, the blood will break the accuser of the brethren. But he's not talking about Satan.
Oh, he's talking about Christians with the sermon.
Yeah. So,
yeah, they say these weird word salad things that it's just like, how do people not fall for this? Like, how do the people not see that this is just like, it's like Louis Farrakhan. They're like, ooh, it rhymes, like, and they fall for it, like the Pied Piper. And it's like, he's saying a bunch of nonsense, but he's like, says it in a rhyme, and people are like, ooh, that's so deep.
That's crazy. All right, you guys, I gotta go. I loved it, and tell everybody, both Laura and Aaron, tell everybody where they can find you. I'll have everything in the show notes, and where they can go to your channels and support Aaron through your Patreon, brother. But go ahead, and you guys go ahead and
Go ahead, Laura. You go first.
I'm really just on YouTube. I do have a couple backup channels, but I don't upload to them. They have old videos on there. So mainly Magical Mystery Church on YouTube.
I am also on YouTube on Underground Publishing. You just gotta look for a Batman face. You can also find my books on Amazon at, I think you can just put in Underground Publishing and you'll find all my books. Yeah, and but you also have links to them on all my videos, and then if you're on my Patreon, electronic copies are free if you're like a minimum subscriber. So I'm gonna keep writing, gonna keep focusing on eschatology, and hopefully, making a dent and waking up some people. But I'm usually dropping a video or two a week, and then John and I are usually on at least once a month.
Yeah, it's gonna be every 2 weeks now because so much stuff's going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces.
At least try to shoot that. All right, I love you guys. God bless each and every one of you. Hopefully this was edifying, and take care, everybody. God bless, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
All right, you guys be blessed.
Bye, guys.
No, I didn't mean to.